She whistled a tune from the old stone flute until the caveman heard the secret signal. Under the unforgiving glare of the sun, Mara sat alone on the edge of the vast canyon, her heart a fragile bird trapped in a cage of despair. With each note, she breathed into the old stone flute. Memories of laughter and warmth filled the bitter void left by her father's betrayal. The haunting melody danced on the winds, a secret song of longing that echoed through the desolate landscape. Yet amidst her sorrow across the rugged hills, a pair of wild amber eyes listened, hungry for the sound of a soul in need. The caveman, a silent guardian of the forgotten, felt the pull of her vulnerability, a signal that whispered of lost hope and the chance for salvation. Little did Mara know, her sorrow would awaken the fiercest protector of the wild, and together they would confront the judgment that had cast her into darkness. The sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting hues of crimson against the twilight sky. In the stillness of the valley she stood alone, the old stone flute cradled delicately between her fingers, her breath caught in her throat as she lifted it to her lips, the first notes escaping like whispers of forgotten memories. Each sound spilled forth, echoing through the air, a blend of hope and sorrow. As she played, the melody wove through the trees, wrapping itself around her like a tender embrace. Yet within her heart, uncertainty gnawed at the edges, a quiet reminder of the choices that had led her to this solitary moment, a dance of longing intertwined with regret. With every note, her past unfurled before her like a tattered scroll. She remembered the faces of those she had once cherished, their laughter now mere shadows in the recesses of her mind. The echoes of their joy intertwined with the bitterness of abandonment. Each measure of the tune tugged at her heartstrings, reminiscent of a time when her music was shared rather than solitary. The flute became her solace, a vessel of emotions too raw to articulate. In that moment, she was both the artist and the canvas, the melody a reflection of her fractured spirit, yearning for connection, yet marred by the burdens of her decisions. As the last notes faded into the stillness, a sudden rustle of foliage pierced the quietude, sending a shiver down her spine. Instinctively, she held her breath, her heart racing with the thrill of the unknown. A figure emerged, silhouetted against the dusky backdrop, eyes glimmering with curiosity and wariness. The caveman, a relic of a simpler time, had heard her tune, a siren call that bridged the chasm of centuries. In his gaze, she found an unspoken understanding, a reflection of her own loneliness mirrored back at her. The moment hung in the air, suspended like a fragile thread, weaving the two of them into an unexpected tapestry of potential redemption. He stepped closer, each footfall heavy with the weight of both time and circumstance. Curiosity transformed into recognition, as if their shared essence transcended the barriers of language and tradition. She felt the warmth of connection ignite within her, a flicker of hope illuminating the shadows that had long clouded her spirit. In that heartbeat of silence, a silent promise emerged. Perhaps they were both lost souls, searching for salvation beneath the weight of their respective histories. The melody, once a lament, now became a bridge, an invitation to discover the paths of healing hidden within their hearts. With the night fully enveloping them, she lowered the flute and met his gaze, her breath steadying as their souls began to intertwine. In that intimate moment, she understood. Judgment had clouded her path, yet here stood the possibility of something extraordinary, an unexpected bond forged not just through music, but through the shared experience of abandonment, a journey toward salvation. Together, they stood on the precipice of change, their unspoken stories anchoring them, whispering of the healing power of connection. In the darkness, a new melody began to form, one filled with the promise of redemption, a symphony waiting to be played. The light danced erratically as she crept through the shadowy cave, the echoes of her footsteps swallowed by the damp walls. She held the old stone flute tightly, her fingers trembling against its smooth surface. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, every shadow whispering warnings she had ignored in her desperate quest to prove herself. A melody bubbled up, sweet, yet tinged with an underlying melancholy. It was a tune from childhood, a lullaby that once brought solace. Each note drifted into the darkness like a soft plea, a flicker of hope in a world that had shunned her for her boldness. Did the caveman lurking deeper in the abyss even understand the language of her heart, the longing woven into her fragile song? With every breath, she felt the weight of abandonment pressing on her chest, a familiar ache that speared into her core. Memories of laughter and warmth faded into the recesses of her mind, replaced by the chilling isolation she had both longed for and dreaded. As the last note lingered, a silence enveloped her, thick and alive, filled with the unsaid things that hung heavy in the air. Would the darkness consume her whole, or would it yield an unexpected salvation? The answer felt tantalizingly out of reach, nestled among the jagged rocks of her past decisions. The caveman's presence was more than a threat. He was the embodiment of her fears, the judgment she had faced for daring to step beyond the familiar. Just then, a rustle echoed through the cave, the sound sharp and sudden, breaking her reverie. Heart racing, she strained to decipher the movement, the flicker of her breath, the only assurance that she still existed in this muted world. In that moment, the unyielding nature of her solitude morphed into something unforeseen. A figure emerged from the shadows, hulking and formidable, yet somehow infused with an air of curiosity. Their gazes locked, and the world around her fell silent again, as if time itself held its breath. In that brief instant, she understood that perhaps her song had not been in vain. The caveman's eyes shimmered with an unspoken challenge, a chance for connection just waiting to unfold. The melody lingered, wrapping around them like an ethereal thread, binding her vulnerability to his silent understanding. She realized then that judgment might yield to something deeper, a chance to rewrite their stories together. The siren call of her flute now reverberated through the cave, each note a bridge stretching across the chasm of their differences. Abandonment, which had once felt like an anchor, became a catalyst for transformation. Here, in this dark expanse, she sensed an uncharted path unfolding, carved by a simple tune that had dared to echo into the void. Was the caveman ready to listen, to transcend the judgments of his world and join her in this fragile dance of hope? As the silence deepened, a flicker of recognition passed between them. The caveman stepped closer, his hesitance palpable, mirroring her own uncertainty. Yet in that moment of shared solitude, something profound stirred within her, a determination to break free from the cycle of fear and abandonment. She raised the flute again, her breath steadying as she prepared to play once more. This time the notes rose with a newfound strength, resonating with the promise of redemption. No longer was she merely the abandoned daughter of a forgotten tribe. She was a messenger of hope, a herald of connection. Together they stood on the precipice of understanding, where music and silence melded into the unspoken truth that lay just beyond their reach. The stone walls loomed like ancient sentinels, their weathered grooves whispering secrets of a time long forgotten. Every note that escaped her lips danced through the air, weaving a tapestry of longing and sorrow. The melody from the old flute, passed down through generations, resonated with the weight of her abandonment. Each breath turned into a plea, echoing through the caverns, filling the emptiness that surrounded her. She could almost feel the cool, damp stone pressing against her, a reminder of the isolation she had grown to know. Yet, in her heart, she clung to the hope that someone, anyone, might hear the fragile strains of her song and uncover the truth buried beneath the rubble of misunderstanding. As the haunting tune lingered, shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, teasing her with the fear of intrusion. The sensation sent shivers down her spine, a mixture of dread and anticipation that drew her deeper into the music's embrace. Each note became a lifeline, tethering her to a world beyond the stone walls, one filled with warmth and connection. She closed her eyes, envisioning faces that had turned away, and for a breath she felt their presence again. But the shadows grew bolder, morphing into a silhouette that neither clung to the past nor embraced her song. Instead, it held a promise of danger entwined with the essence of something primal, something forgotten yet instinctual. The figure emerged from the darkness, a hulking mass wrapped in mystery, yet there was a flicker of curiosity in the way he cocked his head to listen. Her heart raced, caught in the delicate balance between fear and the yearning for salvation. The melody faltered, her fingers trembling against the flute, a stark contrast to the steady pulse of her heartbeat that echoed in the cavern. With each passing moment, she faced a choice: continue the song that had carried her spirit, or succumb to the paralyzing grip of uncertainty. In that instant, she understood the shadows were not merely threats, they were mirrors, reflecting her own unacknowledged fears, constructed by years of judgment and misinterpretation. As the last note faded, silence enveloped them, a thick fog that pressed against her chest. The caveman, a creature of instinct, yet paradoxically human in his gaze, studied her with an intensity that made her blood run cold. In those eyes, she glimpsed a flicker of recognition, an acknowledgement of shared pain masked by uncertainty. The shadows of judgment that had haunted her began to dissolve, replaced by the fragile thread of understanding that connected them. What was once a divide forged by misconceptions began to blur, revealing a path toward redemption. Without a word, she reached for her flute, her gesture a silent invitation, a bridge built from shared vulnerability. In that moment, the cavern transformed. The air thickened with unspoken possibilities. He took a cautious step forward, his expression shifting as if he were feeling the vibrations of her melody within his own chest. The space between them crackled with tension, the weight of past abandonments lifting ever so slightly. It was as if, in their shared silence, they began to unearth the very foundations of their fears, hers rooted in rejection, his in instinctual survival. Together they stood on the precipice of something profound, poised between the shadows of their pasts and the flickering light of newfound connection. The tune had altered, morphing into an anthem of hope, signaling the beginning of an unexpected alliance forged in the depths of despair. The crisp autumn air danced around her as she stood beneath the ancient oak, its gnarled branches heavy with secrets, much like her heart. A familiar tune slipped from her lips, delicate and haunting, the melody of the old stone flute echoing through the woods. It had been years since she had played, but the memories surged back, a cascade of laughter, warmth, and inevitable loss. Each note was a thread in a tapestry of moments lost, binding her to a simpler time before everything fell apart. Yet as the final note faded, a shiver coursed through her. The music had become a siren's call, beckoning the past and the man who once heard her song, a man now shrouded in shadows of their shared abandonment. Days blurred as she replayed the incident in her mind, the cruel twist of fate that severed their bond. In that fleeting moment, she had misjudged the power of her song, believing it to be a mere expression of love, unaware that it would echo through the caverns of his heart, awakening dormant fears. He had stood there, a statue of disbelief, eyes wide with confusion as she sang, the notes dancing between them like forgotten promises. She hadn't seen the storm brewing within him, hadn't grasped that her melody could unearth insecurities, revealing vulnerabilities he desperately tried to conceal. Now, in hindsight, regret gnawed at her, turning sweet memories bitter and leaving her stranded in a sea of guilt. With each passing day, he became more elusive in her thoughts, a phantom haunting the corners of her mind. She had thought her song would save him, but instead it had sealed their fate. The nights grew longer, filled with silence where laughter once resided, her heart aching for the warmth of his presence. The oak tree, once a witness to their joy, now felt like a sentinel of sorrow, guarding the echoes of what they had lost. She longed for a chance to rewrite the past, to soften the impact of her unintentional betrayal, but the reality of her misstep weighed heavily on her spirit, a burden she felt unworthy to bear as she walked through the shadows of their memories. The wind rustled the leaves, each whisper stirring a flicker of hope. Perhaps there was a chance for redemption, a way to mend the gaping wound her careless tune had inflicted. She envisioned him, deep within the forest, cloaked in pain but still breathing, still capable of love. The thought ignited a fire within her, a determination to seek him out, to offer not just apologies but a promise of understanding, of collaboration, of building anew from the wreckage of their past. The melody was not just a signal, it was a compass guiding her back to him, to the essence they once shared. Her heart yearned for a reunion forged in honesty, where vulnerability could become strength rather than a weapon. As she took her first step toward the depths of the forest, the world around her transformed. The rustling leaves became her allies, each step a bridge back to the man who had once cherished her song. She imagined the moment their eyes would meet, the unspoken acknowledgement of their shared pain, and the hope lingering in the air. Would he hear her call? Would he remember the warmth of her melody and the love that had fueled it? The fear of rejection clawed at her, yet the fear of never trying to save him loomed larger. She pressed forward, her heart a fierce drum, carrying the weight of their history and the possibility of a future where missteps could be transformed into steps toward salvation. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ancient valley, where the echoes of the past intertwined with the present. Maris stood atop a ridge, cradling the worn stone flute against her chest. The cool evening breeze tousled her hair, whispering forgotten secrets that hung in the air. As she raised the flute to her lips, the first notes emerged, fragile, hesitant like the delicate threads of her memories. Each sound resonated through the stillness, weaving a tapestry of longing and loss that surrounded her. She imagined the faces of those who once celebrated her music, unaware of how the passage of time had dulled her spirit and silenced her heart. In that moment, she felt the weight of her solitude, a vibrant ache that coursed through her veins. Days turned into weeks, and Maris returned to the same spot, drawn by an unseen force that beckoned her deeper into the valley of her past. Each melody she played was a testament to her resilience, but also a lament for what she had forsaken. The haunting tunes wove through the crevices of the earth, stirring an ancient presence that lingered just beyond her perception. Unbeknownst to her, a figure emerged from the shadows, a caveman whose world had been untouched by the passage of time. He listened, enraptured by the sound that danced across the air, a siren's call that pierced through his isolation. For him, the music was not a mere echo, it was a lifeline, a promise of connection where there had been none. As the final note trailed off, a silence enveloped the valley, thick with anticipation. Maris felt a shiver run through her as she sensed eyes upon her, yet she remained rooted to the ground, caught between fear and curiosity. The caveman, compelled by the rhythm of her song, stepped into the light, his presence startling yet somehow soothing. In his gaze, she saw a reflection of her own longing, a shared yearning for understanding, for companionship. The unspoken bond between them crackled like electricity, igniting a spark that had long been dormant within her. She realized that her melodies, once mere echoes of abandonment, had the power to bridge the chasm of their disparate worlds. But the weight of her past still clouded her heart. Maris wrestled with the memories of those who had turned away, their judgment branding her unworthy of connection. How could she accept this unexpected salvation, this raw, unadulterated bond? Doubt gnawed at her insides, each thought a bitter reminder of her perceived failures. The caveman stood patiently, his presence a steady balm against her turmoil. In his silence, he offered no judgment, only acceptance. It was a truth that wrapped around her like a warm embrace, igniting flickers of hope that had lain dormant. With a deep breath, she resolved to confront the shadows of her past, determined to embrace this chance for redemption. As the moon rose, casting a silvery glow over the valley, Maris played once more, the notes dancing like fireflies in the night. With each breath, she wove a story of resilience, punctuated by the soft gasps of the caveman, who leaned closer, captivated. In that moment, she understood that healing was not a destination but a journey, one that required vulnerability and trust. Their worlds, so different yet connected through the rhythm of her flute, began to merge. As the final notes lingered in the air, Maris felt a transformation within her, an awakening of her spirit and a rekindling of hope. They stood together beneath the vast expanse of stars, two souls intertwined by the forgotten melody of a shared past, ready to carve a new future together. The shadows lengthened as she stood at the edge of the ancient forest, her breath hitching in her throat. The flute, a relic of simpler times, rested against her lips, the cool wood familiar in a world that felt increasingly foreign. In that moment, the haunting melody slipped free, echoing through the trees as it entwined with the whisper of the wind. Each note wove a tapestry of memories, childhood laughter, fleeting glances, and the warmth of hands that once held hers. The music danced through her heart, a bittersweet reminder of the love she had expected to last, only to discover that time carved canyons deeper than any rift they faced. The haunting refrain mirrored the pulse of her longing, an invitation to return to a home she feared she could never reclaim. In the distance, the figure emerged, rugged and wild, shaped by the raw nature that surrounded him. He paused, tilting his head, as if the melody pulled him like the tide to the shore. She felt an unexplainable pull toward him, a strange blend of fear and familiarity. The caveman's eyes flickered with understanding, a flicker of something unspoken that resonated between them. Her heart raced with an instinctive recognition of abandonment, yet to be healed. In the silence that followed her tune, she dared to imagine he could be the savior she hadn't known she was seeking, a bridge between her fractured past and an uncertain future. The music intertwined their fates, lingering like the scent of rain on parched earth. As the final note lingered in the air, she lowered the flute, her fingers trembling. His gaze bore into her, deep and unwavering, stirring echoes of the vulnerability she had buried. In his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own lost hopes and fears, a mirrored abandonment that had haunted them both. She wanted to speak, to release the words trapped within her, but the weight of her judgment, the choices that led her to this lonely edge, clawed at her throat. Would he judge her too for the brokenness that lay beneath her surface? For a moment, the world around them faded, leaving only the electric connection of their shared silence, a space where healing might take root. With a sudden impulse, he took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking like the fading twilight. In that infinitesimal shift, she felt a warmth she hadn't realized she craved. His presence was a balm to her wounded spirit, igniting a flicker of hope within her. Perhaps he could see the shadows that lingered just beneath her skin, the scars of abandonment that marked her soul. In his eyes, she glimpsed a promise of understanding, a potential for redemption that felt terrifying, yet exhilarating. As he extended his hand, she hesitated, weighing the risk of allowing someone else to bridge the chasm left by her past choices. The music still echoed within her, a silent plea for connection and a chance to rewrite her story. In the tender moment that hung between them, she made a choice. As she placed her hand in his, the warmth spread through her like the first rays of dawn breaking through the night. Together, they stood at the precipice of possibility, the weight of abandonment lifting ever so slightly. The forest seemed to hum with renewed energy, and she felt a flicker of life returning to her heart. In the midst of judgment and pain, the unspoken vow danced in the air. She would not let her past define her future. The caveman, too, had the chance for redemption, a shared journey forged in the fire of their vulnerabilities. With a shared breath, they stepped forward, ready to compose a new melody together, a haunting tune of healing and hope. The sun dipped low behind the jagged peaks, casting elongated shadows that danced across the valley floor. Mira stood on the weathered stones of the ancient altar, fingers trembling against the cool surface of the flute. She had unearthed it months ago, buried in the thick, tangled roots of an elder tree, its surface etched with the tales of a forgotten time. As she raised it to her lips, the world around her fell into silence, the whispers of the wind urging her on. Each note she breathed into existence was a bridge to her past, a haunting melody that echoed the longing in her heart, a yearning for connection that had been severed by years of bitterness and misunderstanding. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the haunting lullaby that seemed to summon the spirits of those who once were. The hills, once the cradle of her childhood dreams, now bore witness to her solitude. As her tune filled the air, Mira's heart raced, her thoughts a tempest of doubt and hope. Would he hear her? The caveman who haunted her memories, a figure both monstrous and tender, his absence a wound that had never healed. She remembered their last encounter, a clash of wills that left her feeling abandoned and betrayed. Yet here she was, beckoning him with a melody only they understood, the silent promise that echoed between them, a promise of redemption woven through the forgotten notes. The air thickened with unspoken words, and beneath the weight of memories her resolve hardened. Then, just as the last note lingered in the air, a rustle from the underbrush shattered the fragile stillness. Mira's heart leapt, a wild drumbeat against her ribs. She turned breathless, and there he stood, broad-shouldered and rugged, his expression as unreadable as the stone carvings that adorned the ancient altar. His eyes, deep pools of emotion, scanned her face, searching for the remnants of the girl he once knew. In that moment, the years of isolation faded like mist in the morning sun, replaced by a flicker of recognition, a spark igniting the embers of lost love. The distance between them felt insurmountable, yet achingly tangible, a yearning that filled the void left by their past. Their gazes locked, and Mira felt the weight of her choices settle around her like a shroud. Was this the moment to confess her regrets, the folly of her judgments that had driven them apart? The flute fell to her side, forgotten. What had once seemed like a choice for freedom now felt like a prison of her own making. In her heart, she longed for the strength to reach out, to mend the invisible rift that had grown between them. A subtle shift in his posture told her that he too was grappling with his own demons, a dance of vulnerability that begged for courage to move forward. The world around them faded, leaving just the two of them entwined in a moment of fragile possibility. With a hesitant step closer, Mira breathed out the words she had rehearsed 1,000 times in her mind, but none had ever felt as real as this. "I've missed you." The air crackled with a tension that begged for release, and as she spoke, the melody of the flute played silently in her heart, each note intertwined with the unexpressed pain of abandonment. The caveman's eyes softened, a flicker of hope ignited within their depths. In that instant, the old stone flute became more than an artifact. It was a vessel of their shared history and a beacon guiding them towards a future fraught with uncertainty, yet ripe with possibility. Together they stood on the precipice of their redemption, ready to face the shadows of their past and rewrite the story that had once driven them apart. The sun dipped low over the valley, casting long shadows that danced across the rugged terrain. She stood at the edge of the clearing, her breath barely a whisper against the backdrop of a world inhabited by the echoes of lost time. The old stone flute lay cool against her palms, its surface rough and familiar. With each note she played, a haunting melody filled the air, beckoning memories of laughter and warmth long forsaken. Each trill resonated with a bittersweet longing, intertwining the joy of forgotten days with an undercurrent of desolation. As the sound enveloped her, a fragile hope blossomed within, yet the weight of past mistakes pressed heavily on her chest, threatening to silence her once more. Across the clearing, hidden behind the gnarled roots of an ancient tree, a figure stirred. The caveman, a relic of a time long past, had watched her from the shadows, his brow furrowed in trepidation. Each note of her flute seemed to strike a chord deep within, awakening something primal and dormant. His heart raced with a mixture of confusion and yearning, entangled in the complexities of emotions he could scarcely grasp. He had known abandonment, the sting of solitude that echoed through his hollow days. Disbelief wrapped around him like a thick fog, yet the melody's gentle insistence coaxed him forward, step by cautious step, drawn toward the light of her presence. As the final notes faded into the twilight, a silence filled the air, heavy with unspoken words. She turned, sensing a shift in the atmosphere, her heart pounding like a distant drum. The sight of him, wild and unkempt, brought a rush of adrenaline and fear. Would he recognize her? Would he reach out or pull away, shrouding himself in the darkness of his own past? The silence stretched between them, taut and electric, each second a lifetime of uncertainty. Her mind raced, replaying the judgments that had led to their separation, the moments she had taken for granted. Desperate to bridge the invisible chasm, she raised the flute to her lips again, hoping to weave a thread of connection through the haunting melody. With each note, the caveman felt something unfurl within him, a flicker of recognition that ignited a spark of courage. The melody was foreign, yet familiar, like a childhood lullaby woven into the fabric of his memories. He stepped out from the shadows, emboldened by the sound that resonated between them. The intonation of her tune was a call to arms against his own fears, a secret signal of understanding that washed over him like a soothing balm. Unwittingly, he found himself drawn closer, his heart pulsating to the rhythm of her melody. In that moment, he felt the heavy burden of his past beginning to lift, allowing the warmth of hope to seep into the cracks of his guarded heart. And then, in a flash of intuition, their eyes locked, a moment suspended in time. Her gaze, filled with remorse and yearning, met his, and the world around them faded into insignificance. Neither spoke, yet their souls conversed in a language more profound than words. It was a moment of truth, a recognition of the mistakes that had forged their paths into loneliness. Yet here, in the crux of their intertwined destinies, lay the possibility of redemption. Slowly she lowered the flute, her fingers trembling, and without thinking she took a step forward. The gap between them melted away, and in that fragile space stood the promise of healing, two souls on the precipice of rediscovering each other amidst the echoes of an ancient melody. The air hung thick with an ancient aroma, a mixture of damp earth and lingering smoke from the dying embers of a fire long extinguished. As she brought the stone flute to her lips, a sliver of hesitation slithered through her heart. Each note, soft yet piercing, danced in the twilight, weaving through the dense trees that shielded her from the outside world. With every breath, she released the weight of her loneliness, each trill a plea for connection, a whisper of a past steeped in affection and loss. Memories flooded in, faces of friends left behind, echoes of laughter that now felt like a distant dream. She could almost feel their warmth encircling her, but as the last note faded, so too did her fleeting comfort, leaving her in the stillness of isolation. But then, from the shadows cast by the towering oaks, a figure emerged, rugged and wild, with eyes that glinted like shards of ice against the fading light. He hesitated, caught between the haunting melody and the primal instincts that had governed his life for so long. She met his gaze, a blend of trepidation and resolve sparking between them. In that moment, the barriers of language and culture evaporated, and all that remained was a shared understanding, a profound recognition of abandonment. It pulled at the strings of their souls, awakening a yearning that neither had anticipated. As he stepped closer, the unspoken connection ignited a flicker of hope, illuminating the darkened corners of both their hearts. Yet the fragile bond was underscored by the weight of unvoiced fears. Would he see her as a savior or a threat? Her heart raced, entwined with doubt, as the memories of rejection clawed at her resolve. The melody had been a desperate call for companionship, but what if it only drew him closer to the abyss of his own struggles? She couldn't bear the thought of becoming the catalyst for another's pain. The flute, once a source of solace, now felt like a burden in her hands, heavy with the implications of her actions. Each vibration resonated within her, whispering truths she wasn't ready to face, but the haunting notes lingered, inviting him deeper into her world. As their eyes locked, the space between them seemed to pulse with unspoken words. He drew closer, his breath ragged, a mirror to her own tempestuous heart. In his gaze she saw a flicker of understanding, a recognition of shared scars, of journeys that had left them both bruised and weary. She dared to believe in the possibility of salvation, not just for herself, but for him as well. The ancient woods around them faded, merging into a tapestry of longing and hope. The melody flowed between them, a thread weaving their fates, binding the fragments of their lives into something beautifully whole. This was not just a meeting of bodies, but a convergence of souls, dancing to an unheard rhythm. As the last echoes of her tune reverberated into the depths of the forest, she felt a shift in the air. The shadows seemed to recede, and in that fading light, a promise unfolded. This wasn't merely about survival or the pursuit of safety. It was about the courage to embrace vulnerability. He reached out, his hand trembling as it brushed against hers, igniting a spark of warmth that melted away the remnants of her fears. In that fleeting touch, she found the strength to step back from the edge of despair. Together, they could rewrite their stories, transforming their errors in judgment into a melody of redemption. In the heart of the wild, where secrets and truths collided, they stood on the precipice of newfound beginnings, ready to face whatever awaited them in the world beyond. The echoes of the old stone flute lingered in the cave, a melody that danced through the shadows like fleeting dreams. As the notes curled around her, they seemed to weave a tapestry of longing and regret. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and unfulfilled promises. She closed her eyes, allowing the haunting tune to wash over her, a balm for the churning doubts within. Each breath felt heavier, weighted by the memories of mistrust that had festered between them. Every note she played was a desperate plea, a secret signal only he could understand. Would he recognize the vulnerability behind her music, see the flicker of hope buried deep within the haunting refrain? Outside, the world raged in a cacophony of discontent. The wind howled like a wild beast, rattling the cave's entrance, reminding her of the turmoil that had driven them apart. Shadows danced against the stone walls, reflecting her turmoil. Their once shared laughter now lay buried beneath layers of misunderstanding. How had they allowed that small spark of judgment to grow into this chasm? She felt the weight of those choices pressing down upon her. Each note she played was not just a melody, but a reckoning, a bridge over the turbulent waters of their relationship. Yet, in that moment of self-reflection, she remained uncertain if he would even hear her call. An unexpected rumble echoed through the cave, shaking her from her reverie. With cautious apprehension, she peered toward the entrance, her heart racing like wild horses. He stood there, silhouetted against the fading light, a figure caught between the remnants of their shared past and the fragile future that beckoned. His brow furrowed, a mixture of confusion and curiosity etched on his face as he discerned the haunting melody that filled the air. In that instant, she saw the flicker of recognition, a flash of what they once had, buried beneath the rubble of hurt. The tension between them stilled, a thick silence enveloping them as his gaze met hers, igniting a spark that had lain dormant for too long. She paused, fingers hovering over the flute as the reality of the moment sank in. There, standing before her, was the man she had once trusted implicitly, now a stranger marked by the scars of betrayal. Yet beneath that cold facade, she sensed the warmth of longing. Their eyes locked, an unspoken dialogue flickering like flame. Memories of laughter and warmth flooded back, piercing through the jagged edges of her doubts. She inhaled deeply, steeling herself to bridge the gap that had grown between them. This was the moment to reclaim the melody of their lives, to transform the pain into something beautiful. If only he would take a step forward. The silence stretched, taut like the strings of a bow, ready to unleash an arrow crafted from hope. Swallowing hard, she returned to the flute, pouring her heart into the melody, each note layered with the unspoken words she had left unsaid. It was no longer just a song. It was an invitation to mend what was broken, a testament to her willingness to forgive and be forgiven. As the final notes lingered in the air, she held her breath, waiting for him to respond. Would he acknowledge the fragility of trust, the promise of salvation hidden within their shared past? In that moment, the line between abandonment and redemption blurred, and the prospect of healing hung delicately in the balance. Lila sat on the edge of the cliff, her breath mingling with the wind that whipped through the gnarled trees behind her. The old stone flute lay cradled in her hands, smooth and cool against her skin, a relic of her childhood that echoed with whispers of forgotten melodies. As she raised it to her lips, memories flooded her, the warmth of her mother's embrace, the soothing sound of her father's laughter. But that warmth was a ghost now, leaving behind an ache that seemed to grow with every note. She hesitated, her fingers trembling, caught between the soothing nostalgia of the past and the crippling weight of her present. The haunting tune began to seep through the air, a fragile connection wrapping around her heart, pulling her back to what was lost. Beneath her, shadows shifted among the boulders, the sun casting elongated forms that danced with a life of their own. Unbeknownst to Lila, a figure lurked, drawn by the sound, a primal instinct ignited within him. The caveman, rugged and weathered, was as much a part of the landscape as the rocks that surrounded him. His brow furrowed, instincts sharpened by his solitary existence. He felt a spark of something foreign, curiosity perhaps, or the stirring of a long-buried desire for connection. Each note from the flute resonated with an ancient echo, tugging at the deepest parts of his being. Abandonment, a familiar friend, had woven its way into his heart, but the melody hinted at salvation, weaving through his isolation like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Lila's music cascaded like water down a mountainside, vibrant and alive. Yet an undercurrent of fear rippled beneath her calm facade. The haunting melody could be a call for help, but it also threatened to awaken the demons she had buried deep. As her thoughts spiraled, she closed her eyes, losing herself in the rhythm, unaware that her song was a beacon, guiding the lost toward her while simultaneously exposing her vulnerabilities. Each breath she took mirrored the rise and fall of the notes, a desperate plea for understanding, for someone to hear her. She was a lighthouse in a world of stormy seas, but the darkness of her past loomed ever closer, threatening to swallow the light she emitted. Unseen by Lila, the caveman stepped from the shadows, his heart pounding in rhythm with her song. The edges of his hardened existence began to soften, the weight of solitude momentarily lifted. Was it the melody that pulled him closer, or the promise of something more profound? A fleeting sense of belonging danced in the air between them. He approached cautiously, each footfall deliberate, lost in the spell of her music. The tune wound its way through the trees, filling the space between them with unspoken words and unheard questions. Lila was a stranger, yet her song spoke of warmth, hope, and a world where one could find refuge from the harshness of life. The gulf of their experiences faded, if only for a moment, as the melody intertwined their destinies. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the clearing, carrying with it the sound of rustling leaves and the scent of damp earth. Startled, Lila opened her eyes, scanning the horizon. The caveman froze, unsure whether to reveal himself or retreat back into the shadows. In that brief exchange, their worlds collided and refracted, a silent acknowledgement of the potential for connection amid their shared abandonment. She lowered the flute, heart racing, sensing the presence of another soul. The profound impact of her melody echoed in the silence that followed. Was she merely a vessel for forgotten tunes, or would her song invite him to step into the light? The unseen threat of isolation loomed large, yet in that charged moment, the promise of redemption shimmered just out of reach. The air crackled with tension as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the jagged terrain. She stood there, the old stone flute pressed to her lips, the haunting melody spiraling into the encroaching night. Each note was a plea for connection, a whisper of vulnerability wrapped in a curtain of solitude. In the distant cave, a figure stirred, muscles coiling with instinct as he recognized the tune. Memories of laughter and warmth washed over him, yet the weight of past decisions bore down on him like an unyielding stone. He hesitated, caught between the desire to answer her call and the fear of the uncharted path that lay ahead. As her breath melded with the wind, the melody wove through the silence, an echo of shared moments now cloaked in shadows. She closed her eyes, imagining a world where mistakes could be erased, where judgment didn't define the shapes of their lives. In the caveman's chest a storm brewed, a tempest of regret and longing. He clenched his fists, the roughness of his palms a stark reminder of harsh truths. Each note reached him like a hand outstretched, offering both salvation and the risk of rejection. The dance of survival was not merely in the physical realm, but played out within the heart, where the most dangerous battles raged unseen. The haunting tune beckoned, weaving a story of loss and hope that flickered like a candle fighting against the dark. She thought of the day their laughter filled the cave, how they had danced among the shadows, believing they were invincible. But life had twisted their paths with unforgiving choices, each step away from one another, carving deeper into their souls. In that moment, she felt both utterly alone and overwhelmingly connected, lost in a memory that shimmered like starlight against the vast emptiness of their separation. Her fingers caressed the flute, each breath a desperate attempt to bridge the chasm of silence that had grown between them. His feet shifted, a subtle betrayal of his heart's desires. The cave loomed behind him, a sanctuary turned prison. Each note reverberated through his bones, igniting a flicker of hope that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. He could almost taste the sweetness of forgiveness, yet the bitterness of pride clung stubbornly to his throat. As she poured her soul into the melody, he felt an invisible thread pulling him closer, urging him to take that first step into the unknown. A single path diverged before him, illuminated by her music, and in that moment he knew he could either drown in despair or leap into the embrace of the light she offered. The final note lingered in the air, a delicate surrender to fate. In that suspended silence, they both stood poised on the edge of discovery, each heartbeat amplifying the gravity of their choices. She lowered the flute, breathless, her heart racing with a mix of hope and fear. The caveman's resolve began to shift. He took an uncertain step forward, his world expanding beyond the confines of judgment. Their eyes met, unspoken words swirling in the air, weaving a new narrative of potential and redemption. Amid the rubble of their past, the dance of survival unfolded, an intricate ballet marking the fragile line between despair and the promise of renewal. Beneath the flickering light of a dying fire, shadows danced like forgotten memories on the stone walls of the cave. She sat, the old stone flute pressed between her trembling fingers, its surface cool against her skin. Each note she coaxed from its depths floated softly into the cavern, a haunting reminder of the world beyond. As the melody took form, her heart swelled with a bittersweet ache, teetering on the edge of hope and despair. The song was a lifeline, weaving through the silence, every note an unspoken plea, a tether to the humanity she feared had slipped away forever. Outside, the night was thick with anticipation. The caveman, a hulking figure carved by the harsh elements of survival, prowled the shadows, lost in the instinctual rhythm of his existence. The echoes of her tune reached him, enticing and strange, like a whisper from the past. A flicker of recognition sparked in his chest, a strange warmth battling the cold reality of his solitude. Each step he took was deliberate, haunted by the remnants of dreams long buried beneath the weight of primal survival. The flute's song pulled at the strings of his heart, an echo of a time when trust and connection weren't just relics. As he neared the entrance to the cave, the air thickened with unsteady anticipation. She sensed his presence, drawing a sharp breath as the melody faltered, her heart racing like a trapped bird desperate for flight. Would he understand her intentions, or would he see only the vulnerability in her music? The fear of abandonment gnawed at her insides, yet the hope of salvation glimmered like a fragile flame. She resumed playing, pouring every ounce of longing into the notes, each clear sound cutting through the darkness, bidding the wild man closer, as if the music could bridge the chasm between their worlds. He lingered at the threshold, caught between instinct and the stirring of something inexplicable. The tune resonated deep within him, unraveling the layers of emotion he had long buried. He felt the weight of loneliness lift with each rising note, the melody a gentle nudge towards an awakening he didn't know he craved. The sound called forth memories of laughter, warmth and connection, things he had sacrificed on the altar of survival. As he stepped into the dim glow of the cave, the unspoken bond began to weave through the air, an invisible thread connecting their disparate souls. In that fragile moment, time held its breath, suspended between fear and possibility. She looked up, her eyes meeting his across the flames, vulnerable, yet resilient. A silent understanding passed between them, weaving a tapestry of redemption from the threads of their pain. The music flowed seamlessly, binding the past with the present, creating a sanctuary amid the shadows. The pain of judgment and abandonment began to dissolve, replaced by the promise of salvation, whispered through the soft notes of an old stone flute. In that cavernous embrace, a new path unfurled, a journey entwined with hope, where two souls could reclaim the light in each other's eyes. The cavern's shadows enveloped her, each breath echoing like a whispered secret in the vast, oppressive silence. She clutched the old stone flute, its surface cool against her palms, a relic of forgotten melodies that once brought life to the valleys above. The remnants of her hope hung like stale air, clinging to her insides, as if the walls themselves absorbed her despair. Each note she played was a ghost, floating into the dark, desperate for someone, anyone, to answer her call. She thought of the sun-drenched meadows she once roamed, how the laughter of friends had seemed a promise, now reduced to the haunting lullaby of solitude. With every breath, doubt twisted her heart, an uninvited guest she couldn't shake. In the distance, a low growl reverberated through the stone. Her heart raced, thrumming a frantic rhythm against her chest, mingling with the forlorn notes that drifted from her flute. The cave, once a sanctuary for her sorrowful music, morphed into a prison of fears. Shadows danced menacingly at the edges of her vision, and she could almost feel the weight of abandonment pressing down upon her. The isolation whispered lies that gnawed at her resolve. She had been forgotten, unworthy of rescue. Yet, deep inside, a flicker of defiance stirred, a longing to transform her lament into a signal, a cry that could pierce the gloom. With every breath she played louder, pushing against the darkness wrapping around her. With each haunting melody, she conjured memories of laughter and warmth, fading echoes of a life now worlds away. Her fingers trembled as they danced along the flute, a fragile connection to a lost self, the girl who had dared to dream. She played not for herself alone, but for the unseen listener lurking in the shadows, a silent guardian who might yet hear her story. The notes swirled around her, painting the cavern with colors of longing, regret, and yearning. The music became a lifeline, an unspoken plea reaching out into the abyss, hoping to pull them both from the depths of despair. She envisioned him, the caveman, with kind eyes and a heart that might recognize her suffering and rise to bridge the chasm of solitude. Suddenly, the growl morphed into something softer, a rumble that resonated in harmony with her song. Hope surged within her like a breaking tide, a warm light piercing through her encroaching shadows. She played with renewed fervor, each note a step closer to connection, a lifeline cast into the unknown. The air crackled with anticipation as she wrapped her emotions around the melody, weaving a tapestry of vulnerability and strength. She imagined the caveman's rugged form emerging from the depths, drawn not only to her music, but to the pulse of life that she desperately clung to. Could he sense her need for salvation, the desperate yearning to not be alone in this cavern of despair? In that moment, the cave ceased to be merely a dark abyss. It transformed into a vessel of possibility, a crucible where despair could become redemption. She poured her heart into the flute, infusing each note with the weight of her abandoned dreams and the flickering flame of hope. The music soared, filling the cavern with an ethereal glow, intertwining with the essence of who she used to be. She embraced her vulnerability, a rawness that shattered the silence and bridged the gap between their worlds. As the melody wove through the darkness, she believed fiercely that he would hear it, that he would step forward not as a rescuer, but as a kindred spirit, willing to share in her journey from despair toward the light of understanding and connection. In the dim light of the cave, shadows danced like phantoms on the walls, mirroring the turmoil within her heart. Each note from the old stone flute slipped through the silence, a haunting melody that resonated with her deepest fears and longings. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the music, allowing it to weave through the cracks in her spirit. It wrapped around her like a fragile cocoon, holding her tightly, yet also reminding her of the chill of abandonment. The ache of solitude mingled with fleeting memories, whispering tales of a life once vibrant and full. The walls echoed her song, yet the silence beyond remained unbroken, taunting her with the absence of a listener. As her fingers brushed the carved surface of the flute, a memory unfurled, a glimpse of laughter shared under the sun, warmth radiating from familiar faces. But like shadows drawn by dusk, those faces faded, leaving only the chill of betrayal. She had trusted them to stand by her, to see her worth, yet their absence was a constant reminder of the judgment that had led her to this secluded place. Each breath she took felt heavy, seasoned with regret. That judgment, a harsh whisper from the past, seemed to cling to her like a vine, squeezing the breath from her lungs as the melody turned mournful, a reflection of her own unraveling. Then the cave trembled with unexpected movement, and her heart raced as she sensed a presence lurking just beyond the reach of her notes. A figure emerged, a silhouette against the flickering shadows, eyes glimmering with a fierce curiosity. The caveman, drawn by the sound of her sorrow, stepped closer, his brow furrowed in the confusion of his own past. She halted her song, her heart pounding deafeningly, torn between fear and an unexplainable hope. Was this new presence a harbinger of salvation, or another judge, ready to dismiss her once more? Their gazes locked, and in that moment, an unspoken connection crackled like static in the air, suspending time itself. As he lowered himself, taking cautious steps toward her, the air thickened with a mix of anticipation and dread. She could see the lines of hardship etched into his face, each one a testament to his own battles fought in silence. With each shared breath she felt a shift, a gentle tug at the threads of her heart. They were two souls wandering through the darkness, seeking light in places they thought forever lost. The unspoken understanding between them flickered like the flame of a candle, fragile yet unyielding. She found her voice again, the flute cradled in her hands, and began to play once more, the melody morphing into a duet of uncharted possibilities. In the harmony of their combined breaths, each note became a thread, weaving a tapestry of resilience that transcended their pasts. The caveman listened intently, his expression softening, as if he could finally hear the secret she had long held captive within her heart. As the last note lingered in the air, a fragile peace settled between them, binding their fates in a shared moment of vulnerability. The cavern, once a tomb of isolation, transformed into a sanctuary where redemption threaded through the silence like golden light. She understood then that perhaps judgment wasn't the final word. Perhaps, in this unexpected encounter, they could craft a new beginning, a melody of hope rising from the ashes of their solitude. As the last notes of the old stone flute faded into the whispering winds, Tima stood on the edge of the valley, her heart both heavy and light. She had walked a treacherous path, filled with misjudgments that echoed with the cries of those she had unintentionally hurt. Yet, in the very depths of her solitude, she had unearthed a truth as ancient as the hills around her, that each echo of despair could lead to a melody of hope. The caveman, once a figure of fear in her mind, had become a steadfast companion, a reminder that even the wildest hearts could find solace in the embrace of understanding. Together they crafted a story of redemption, one where pain transformed into resilience and loneliness blossomed into a family bound not by blood, but by shared scars and laughter. Looking towards the horizon, she saw the sun dipping below the mountains, casting a warm glow that ignited the sky. In that moment, Tama realized that every mistake could become a stepping stone, every lost tune an opportunity for a new song. As she turned to her newfound kin, she whispered a promise into the wind. "We are never truly alone, we are always becoming. If this story touched you, Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy powerful tales of courage, love, and redemption, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one.